This is an interview with Gravehuffer guitarist Ritchie Randall by Nick Perkel on Friday, July 31st, 2020. Now, Ritchie, can you tell me what it was like growing up in Joplin, Missouri?
Yeah, sure, man. Joplin is a pretty interesting place. We're right in the middle of the country, so it's kind of a cool location as far as, growing up in an area that kind of has a lot going on in such a small town. I mean, we're only about 50,000 people, so it's fairly small, but you go down the highway north, south, east, or west for about an hour or so, and you're going to get into a pretty big city like Kansas City or Tulsa or Springfield. A few more hours, you got St. Louis. You go down south, and you got Arkansas. Kind of a different vibe down there. It's called the natural state, so it's real pretty, literally. And but they have a really cool scene in the Northwest area, and so we're kind of in the middle of all this action going on. So it's a pretty cool place. I grew up. I mean, it's funny. It's kind of like quiet, but at the same time, there was always some stuff to do, and it's kind of a suburban type of atmosphere here. Nothing like crazy major like going on as far as all the kids were like safe, and we never had like a bunch of trouble or anything like that. And so it was a pretty cool place. As far as it relates to like music and stuff like that, we had a big punk scene here in the 90s. It was kind of like part of the Ozark punk scene, which I was kind of, talking about as far as all the other towns that surround us. We were kind of in the middle of all that. So we just had shows wherever we could. And there was just so many different venues that were popping up that had all ages shows. So all the kids would come out, and bands were just springing up left and right. And so it was really, really cool times. That lasted for about 15 years or so, and then it kind of fizzled out. But now it's kind of weird as far as like the music scene goes. It kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but it's still pretty solid. So, but yeah, and yeah, there's lots of tornadoes and stuff. that definitely affected the band in the mid 2000s. We lost our house and our band space. The tornado kind of fucked Joplin up pretty good in 2011. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to say the least.
Now, what was it like as a young music fan for you, just growing up and also eventually performing in bands?
My dad was like really into a lot of the stuff from the 70s, like Led Zeppelin and The Who and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Like my parents named me after Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple, so they were like really into the whole music thing. And he went to the Army and was stationed in Germany in the late 60s, and he saw a bunch of bands back then. Like he saw The Who and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all that stuff when he was stationed in Germany in the Army. And he brought all that back with him. And being in the middle of the country again, it's kind of cool, but also at the same time, stuff gets to us a little slower as opposed to like the East Coast and West Coast. So we're kind of slow to get some of the music and just all the arts and stuff kind of filter their way in a little more slow. So when my dad came back from Germany with all this new music, nobody in this town knew what the hell any of that stuff was really. So they thought he was kind of a weirdo. And so like, that crazy Donnie, what is all this weird music? And I grew up with that stuff in the house as a little kid. So, and my dad would just blast it at like insane volume. He was like a hippie. And so yeah, they were always blasting all that old school, like classic rock and kind of proto metal and stuff like that. So that definitely had an impact on me and made me want to like do music and play guitar. And they bought me my first guitar in the mid to late 80s, if I can remember right. they paid for guitar lessons for like 5 years or so, and that really helped train my ear and everything. So yeah, they were definitely supportive of me being a musician. So I'm really glad I had parents that were like, way into it and helped me out along the way. Excuse me. And then, going to school here and meeting kids that were into music as well. And a lot of them were like people that were very socially awkward, like me. I never talked to anybody at school hardly. I had a few select friends here and there. So yeah, you just get to meet people by basically like, hey, there's a kid with a Morbid Angel shirt. He's probably cool, So that was kind of how it went back then. So yeah, that's pretty much how it all started anyway.
Now, just thinking, like, you're from like Missouri. How much of an influence does Chicago have, like, on you guys? Like, just because you're saying, like, it takes some time for like the East Coast and the West Coast stuff to get to you guys. What about Chicago, though?
Chicago that's about an 8-hour drive, and we've played there a few times. And dude, it's pretty rad there. It's funny. That's an interesting question, and I've never really thought about it. Because all the music that goes through Chicago, it's the third biggest city in the country. So yeah, that definitely is a valid point. I don't know. I feel like Chicago kind of melds with St. Louis in a little bit of a way, because it's not it's only like 3 hours or so from St. Louis. And so stuff from St. Louis still takes some time to get here because it's all the way across the state. We're in the extreme southwest corner of Missouri. Right. I mean, like my house is literally only like 4 or 5 miles from Kansas and about 15 miles from Oklahoma. Arkansas is a little further south, about 30 minutes or so, which is probably about 25, 30 miles. So yeah, Chicago, you had Chicago and then like Memphis and like New Orleans. So blues was a really big thing here. If I had to really think about it. So yeah, the Chicago blues and, St. Louis kind of had that going on too. And so did Kansas City. Actually was a little more even, I guess, famous for having that kind of music style going on. I don't know if you've ever heard of Max's Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
It was a venue it was a big deal back then. And a lot of bands went through there and played Max's. It's interesting that you bring that up and how that all kind of correlates with where we are. And I kind of had to think about it. But yeah, it totally makes sense that the North and the South kind of areas do filter their influence here. So yeah, good question.
Now, tell me the history of your band, Gravehuffer.
Gravehuffer started in like 2000. Well, okay. We started in 2008, and we were called Crom. And Crom is from Conan the Barbarian. It was Conan's deity, his god. We just had a hell of a time trying to find a cool name. And we stuck with Crom for about 3 years. And we ended up changing to Gravehuffer after the big tornado that came through here. We went on hiatus for like 7 months or so. And we had nowhere to play. It blew half the town away. We were just kind of like, what the hell do we do? And our bass player, Mike, he suggested we change the name and kind of start over. And same band. We still had the same songs. We just changed the name to Gravehuffer. And that came from a friend of ours that he had a band, I guess the band never really happened, but he had that name for a band he was trying to put together. And they were kind of a rockabilly kind of a band. And that never ended up working out. And I just remember Mike asking, hey, we'd love to use that name for our band. And he's like, okay, man, maybe if I can just throw me a free T-shirt every once in a while. So that's kind of how that all came about. But Mike, myself, and our drummer Larry were in a band called Initial Detonation. And this would have been from like 95 to about 2000. And we played just all over the country. We toured a couple times and played in Canada. And it was a lot of fun in that band. And it was like a crust punk, I guess you'd call it. I know Europe calls it like anarcho-punk, kind of like Discharge and Crass and that kind of stuff. Amoebics, that, just the whole, I can't really think of any other stuff off the top of my head, but yeah, it was like the kind of politically inclined, politically minded, but the crusty stuff kind of has a little bit of like a metal influence, but it's still like totally punk rock, so it's kind of like a mixture between hardcore punk like Black Flag and then metal or thrash, kind of stuff. So yeah, we ended up doing that, and then we kind of like started families, I guess. Everybody got married and had kids, and this would have been about early 2000s, and then about 2008 is when we all kind of decided, yeah, let's get back together and do the band. Let's get the band back together. And so we we did that, and we ended up getting a different singer and decided to kind of do a little bit more in the metal kind of vein, I guess. But it's definitely different than Initial Detonation, but you can hear some of what we did in that band in Gravehuffer. We've been doing it for, going on 12 years now. It's kind of crazy.
Now, tell me the current lineup of your band.
Currently, we have Jay Willis on drums, and he's been our drummer for about a year. We had a kind of a Spinal Tap revolving drum throne there for a couple of years. And then James was our singer up until like this March, I believe. And so that was kind of, we weren't expecting that. And I guess he had just kind of grown apart from us and kind of grown just tired of doing the whole band thing. And I don't know, we're not real sure why he decided to leave, but he ended up leaving. And we actually got a really good friend of his named Travis McKenzie to sing. And we kind of eased him into the recording of the new album, which is what we were in the middle of doing when James quit, which, man, that was bizarre. Anyway, and then myself on guitar, and I do a little bit of singing. And then our bass player is Mike Gilgy. He pretty much does some of the art, and he does almost all the recording and mixing and stuff. And he's got a studio/rehearsal space in his house. And so that's pretty much where we get together to jam and record and all that stuff. And so he's the mastermind behind all that. As far as our drummer, Jay, he also sings, and he even wrote quite a few like riffs and stuff for the new album. And so it's been a really cool, like, collaborative effort, so we're digging it right now.
How often do you guys practice, and what has it been like lately?
We typically practice once a week usually like on weekends, typically Sundays. We haven't practiced, we haven't had like an actual practice since, oh my gosh, it's been probably about 4 or 5 months. We were kind of busy recording and writing and recording this new record. So Black Doomba Records is putting that out, and we should have some big news coming up on that here any time now within the next week or two. And but since we were busy doing that, we didn't really practice per se. But we are going to be practicing for the first time in 4 or 5 months here in a couple days. It'll be this Sunday. We're going to have our first like full band practice. And I work at a university here in town, and I'm the printer/mail person. And so I printed up some like spiral bound like lyric books for everybody. And so I want us to be like ready to go, since we're all doing some singing now. We're all going to have our lyrics ready, and everybody's going to have their chops, ready to go. And everybody's been practicing at home. So it's always kind of weird putting it all together at first. Sometimes you have a little bit of kind of funky, not growing pains, but just kind of getting used to doing it again since it's been a while, So yeah, we're really excited to start jamming again. I think with the recording of the new album during the whole pandemic thing, that was kind of a good thing for, we were just lucky that we were in the middle of that process. If we weren't recording this new record, I don't know. I really don't know how we would have handled practice.
Now, can you pick out 5 albums that have influenced Gravehuffer the most?
I know for me, if I had to pick 5 myself to influence Gravehuffer, well, I'll probably have to start with like something Metallica related. James Hetfield's Right Hand is just really influential on myself. And then Master of Puppets was pretty much my first. I mean, I remember when that came out and Battery came on, and I mean, that was like kind of a game changer for me. But also, like Trey from Morbid Angel is a really big influence. It's kind of his crazy, chaotic riff style. And then, so I would say probably Covenant. Covenant with Morbid Angel's Covenant. But then I also kind of like the heavy, like slow, riffy stuff. Like it's hard to beat Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi. I mean, he's just a monster. As far as the Black Sabbath album, I'll have to go with Volume 4. But then I also really like the 3-chord punk rock stuff. I'd say Ramones are probably my favorite for that. I kind of like just the old school 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 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 you know. Probably the Ramones' first album, just Ramones. And then a fifth, probably Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East, the live album. That was pretty much the album that made me want to be a musician. My dad had that in his record collection. I remember looking at the cover and seeing KK Downing with his flying V holding it in the air, and I thought that was badass. I'd never seen anything like it, and I was like, well, I wonder what this sounds like. So I put the record on, and Exciter came on, and I was like, holy crap. And I was like 5 years old, 6 years old, and so that was huge. So, yeah, that's my 5.
How did you develop your interest in history over time?
History for me, like I don't really write lyrics for Gravehuffer, so it's a little harder question for me, more of a question for our old singer James or even Travis. But now we do, you know, the rest of us do kind of come up with subject matter and stuff like that. But I remember really liking history in school, and I always made A's in history. So, you know, it's definitely something that we're all into. I think just having your teachers in high school, when they were really passionate about the history of pretty much everything. So I never did go to college, and I kind of wish I would have, just for one, taken all the cool like Western Civ classes and things like that. And my wife's a big history buff too, so I'm always asking her stuff. And you know, she's got her bachelor's in biology, but she had some really good history teachers that teach at the university I actually work at. So she's always telling me stuff about all the classes that she took and all the great professors she had. So, yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with the passion of the teachers. And so, you know, working in education, that's something that really I think is very important. Like I said, it's a little more difficult for me to answer that, but being as I don't really write the lyrics. But I think history is just, I think it's pretty universally accepted that it's an interesting subject. I mean, there are probably some people that like, I don't care about history, but I think for the most part, people are at least intrigued by it. So yeah, there you go.
Now, tell me the personal take for your band on crafting the song Stlingrads Cross.
I do remember when we wrote that song, as far as like the music part, Mike and myself, we wrote that in between searching for drummers, because our original drummer Larry Deerdorf had left. Excuse me, and he just couldn't play shows anymore due to his job, but he was always on the road. But anyway, we were in the middle of looking for drummers, and Mike and I were just basically like, well, we'll just get together at each other's house and just write some music. And I remember we wrote Stlingrads Cross in Mike's bedroom at the time, and I'd been listening to a lot of the latest Judas Priest Firepower album. So the main riffs to Stlingrads Cross definitely have a Judas Priest kind of feel to them. And I remember writing that, and Mike and I putting that song together. We took it to James, our singer, and the new drummer we were trying out at the time. His name was Matt Browning. James was like, man, this song's pretty different, man. He goes, it kind of reminds me of a march or, you know, going into battle. He goes, I've always wanted to write a song about the Battle of Stalingrad. So this was something that James had been thinking about for a while. I think he was just kind of waiting for the right music. And so when he heard that main riff, that sparked his idea to write about that. And so we ended up putting the rest of the song together to kind of go along with how the battle took place, the actual fighting, and then the aftermath. As we're putting the song together, like recording wise, we decided to use the melody from, it's called the Volga Boatman, and it was a Russian like traditional song. And we put the melody of that at the very end of the song to kind of pay tribute to the soldiers that they were fighting for, basically ending Nazi Germany. So that's at the very end, the melody you hear on. I'm playing like slide guitar. I believe there's this ebow in there as well, which is this thing you hold over the strings that makes a magnetic field, and it vibrates the strings, and it almost sounds like you're playing with a bow, like a violin bow or something. And so we layered all that up and used that melody, and it's kind of cool when people listen to it and they're like, "Hey, that sounds familiar." And so we tell them what it is, and like, "Wow, that really ties it all together." And we got a couple of our friends in a band, Sardis, that played the ripping guitar solos on it. And one of the guys starts with Flight of the Valkyries, and then the other guy played a German composition starting his solo. So we thought that would be cool to kind of clash, and we put a lot of thought into it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
For Demon Face, that was about Edgar Mordred. How do you first hear about
Uh-huh.
that story?
Edward Mordrake was something that I think I read about him online or something. And it was also in this show called American Horror Story, and on Netflix. And he's just in it like kind of briefly, but he had this parasitic twin in the back of his head, like a face. And Edward Mordrake called it his demon face, and so that's kind of where we got the title. And that was a song that I had suggested, so that was kind of my impetus, I guess. And so I brought that subject matter to the band, and James was like, "Yeah, I've heard of him." And he goes, "Send me some material about the guy, and we can get started on it." And then Mike and I had some riffs lying around that we thought would fit for that. And we thought it'd be cool to start out kind of slow and sludgy and kind of menacing, because it's kind of, this guy's got this parasitic twin that, like, according to Edward, is quoted as saying it whispered things from hell to in his ear, and he would not be able to sleep at night, and it would laugh when he would cry, and it would cry when he would laugh, and it was basically always the opposite emotion for that Edward was, and so he really it just drove him crazy. And when we were writing the song, we thought it would be cool to like increase the intensity toward the middle, and that would be basically the point to where Edward just lost his mind. And so that's basically what the music and the lyrics do, is they increase in intensity, and Edward's just going crazy. And it was kind of fun at the end where there's like this laughing and crying, and all the guys in the band kind of got together, and we tracked a whole bunch of tracks of us laughing and crying and saying crazy stuff, and we kind of put it at the end of the song. And we were kind of thinking, at the end of Master of Puppets, there's all that laughing and stuff, and we thought it'd be kind of cool to do that, and plus kind of pay homage to that song. So yeah, that was pretty much where that came from and how that came to be and how we recorded it. And it was definitely a lot of fun to do.
Now, you ever take a look at Folklore and things like Weird New Jersey for inspiration?
I'm not sure what Weird New Jersey is. What is that?
Okay, check it out. It's kind of like a statewide publication for New Jersey, just like with different random folklore and old wives' tales. Like there's this place called Clinton Road, and they say that there's like Satanists down there and stuff like that. But I mean, it's just like one time somebody actually dumped a dead body there. There's other different kind of like curiosity type thing. It's kind of like the type of thing that teenagers go to get in trouble, and it's kind of like if a cop sees you on that road, they're going to give you a ticket for trespassing because it's a private road, and it's like, I don't really know, or I can't really tell you exactly what goes on there, but it's like a local legend type place.
Yeah, we've got something similar to that here. It's called the Spook Light or the Ozark Spook Light, the Hornet Spook Light. There's different names for it. It's funny. I live on the street, and it's called Schifferdecker Avenue. And if you keep going south, only a few blocks, it turns into Coyote Drive, and that also turns into Highway 43. And you go about 5 miles, 6 miles south of my house on the same road I live on. You take a right in Hornet, Missouri. It's just this tiny, like, 50 people live there kind of thing. And there's a dirt road there that it runs into, and that's where the Spook Light is. And it's been said that it's like ball lightning or it's reflections from cars on the highway and all this other stuff. But scientists have been out there and they have a museum, or I don't know, they used to have a museum that kind of talked about it. And there's, like, you're talking about legends. The legend is that it's a headless guy looking for his head, and it's his lantern. It's the Spook Light. And it's pretty interesting. Like, if you were to Google it on Google or whatever, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff about it. We will probably write something about that on the next record because we've been talking about it, and it's definitely something that piques our interest. And I've personally seen it, the Spook Light, before. It scared the crap out of me. I mean, I was like 12 or 13, and the two people I was with, my cousin and his girlfriend, she was driving, and she flipped her shit and turned around and, like, peeled out of there basically because it was starting to come toward us, and they're like, yeah, we've had enough of this. But I was like, oh no. Even at that age, I was scared, but at the same time very intrigued. So, and I've been out there a couple times since and haven't seen it. Usually you have to be super quiet for it to, like, come out, but yeah, nobody's ever been able to tell what this thing is. But it's there and it's real, but nobody knows what it is. It's just a mystery. We don't really have any other stuff like that here as far as, like, curiosity is concerned. We do have the Bonnie and Clyde house. That's like 2 blocks away from my in-laws. It's funny. The guy that runs our record label, Black Doomba Records, his name's Tommy Stewart. And he was in a band called Hollow's Eve in the 80s. They were signed to Metal Blade Records. They toured with Slayer and Motorhead, and they were kind of a big deal. But anyway, him and the drummer for the band he's in now, Direwolf, they came here and played a show with us last November. And him and his drummer stayed at that Bonnie and Clyde house. You can actually stay there and pay a small fee. And he said it was pretty cool. Like, the bullet holes are still on the wall where they had a shootout with the cops, and you could see where Clyde was carving into the floor with his knife. And Tommy said he goes, I was sitting right there and I could see all the knife carvings right under my feet. And he goes, there's like a diary that was left there. And he goes, I was reading through the diary, and kind of interesting for sure as far as that goes. We also have Route 66, and there's been songs and all kinds of stuff about that, and that's like a mile north of our house. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting place for sure.
What 3 Gravehuffer songs that you composed are you most proud of, and why?
Well, I guess I'll start with the first album. I'll just go with Inherit the Wasteland. Excuse me. I feel like that was the first song that all of us contributed to for the first time. It wasn't just like, this guy brought this song in, this guy brought this song in. That was like the first song that we all kind of wrote together. And you can kind of tell because it ebbs and flows and tempo changes, and it's pretty cool. And I also it was my first guitar solo on an album, so I was pretty excited about that. We'll go with the Your Fault album next, and I would say probably Chains Around You. That was like one of the first songs we had that had like clean guitars in it and clean singing, and one of our first, I guess, weird songs. So yeah, that's one that we usually close our live set with, and people are always like, wow, that song's awesome. So people seem to like it. It's a crowd favorite. I'll go with something from the new album. There's a song called Sights to the Sky that's about Buzz Aldrin. one of the first men on the moon. It's got just all kinds of stuff going on that song. Like all these, it's just riff city. We also have Chewy from the band Voivod playing a solo on it, and that's definitely a very, very proud moment. So those are my three.
What kinds of things is Gravehuffer doing right now to remain active, considering the pandemic situation?
Well, we're just trying to remain active on our social media and trying to just promote what's going on with the band as far as our new album and stuff like that. Like, we haven't really, we haven't told anybody what the title is or revealed the artwork or anything like that yet, but everybody knows we have a new album coming out. We always try to come up with new merchandise ideas. Sometimes I'll do Facebook Live videos and stuff like that on our page. Kind of talk to people and let them know what's going on. Maybe play snippets of the new album on my guitar or whatever. We just try to always make, at least one post a day, just letting people know that, hey, we're still here, we're still active. Check out this or that. We've got a lot of merchandise and stuff, so we'll promote the merchandise, or we'll post a picture, or like we did a photo shoot here a couple weeks ago, and that garnered a lot of attention. So it was kind of fun getting together, all four of us, and taking some pics around town, because these pictures are going to be included with our 3 or 4 month promotion that we're going to do for the new record. So it's a lot of stuff ramping up. And then, of course, this weekend we'll be practicing for the first time, and I'm sure we're going to film that and put that out there. And so, yeah, we just try to, post a little something here or there every day. And we had face masks made, and those have been kind of not a attention grabber, but they've been something that people have to wear masks due to, whatever mandates or whatever their state or city has. People, man, I need a cool mask. You guys got masks? And I'm like, yeah, dude. So, we got them for pretty cheap. And like my work, for instance, I have to wear a mask at work. So they're cool with me wearing a Gravehuffer mask. So it's pretty cool to be able to just share little things like that. People will send us pictures and stuff, and we'll share them out. And like, hey, I got my Gravehuffer mask today. And, we share people's posts about them buying records or buying guitar picks and just stuff like that.
So what's the situation like in Missouri for performing concerts right now?
Yeah, there's really not any shows going on. There have been, I think, a few here and there. Excuse me. There's a place here called Blackthorn Pizza and Pub, and that's the place where we tend to play most of our local shows. I talked to the owner here 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she said that there was a show and like only 5 people came, and people are just kind of leery still, and it's kind of hard to blame them. But she said that their drink and food sales have been just through the roof. So that's good that people are still out there supporting local businesses, but still being careful about, gathering in groups, large groups or whatever. So it's been kind of odd as far as that goes. There's no like mandates or laws or anything to my knowledge about having shows. I think it's just people they're just not ready for it yet. So, and that's just on the people that are, that's their own free will that they want to come out or not. Shows are still happening. It's just people just they're just not ready, or they just don't feel safe, I guess.
Now, I've heard you're a big history buff. What is the absolute coolest thing you have related to history?
Yeah, for myself, honestly, my grandfather, he has this trombone from it's like the late 1800s, like 1890 something. He had that in the family for I don't know how long, and it's like a platinum plated trombone, a little smaller than a normal trombone, but it's got a carving in it. And you were mentioning Chicago. the manufacturer was a Chicago manufacturer, and I tried to see about getting it fixed, but everybody's afraid to touch it because they're afraid it'd fall apart, I guess. So we've kind of just got it cleaned up and left it intact. But that's definitely one thing that it's pretty wild. Actually, my oldest son, Zach, he actually played that trombone on one of our songs. Pretty much what he did was just played a couple of notes and harmonized them. It sounds like a really evil, like, train horn or something. It's kind of cool, but it's on our song No Boundaries, No Borders, which was on the vinyl version of our Your Fault record. So yeah, it's kind of cool to to have something that old, over 100 years old, and then have my son play it and have it be on our record. So that was definitely a cool little tidbit. And then knowing that my grandfather fought in World War II in Korea, and that was something that was a part of him. So yeah, that thing's been all over the world almost.
Final words.
Yeah. We've got this new record coming out, and it's going to be probably out in the 1st of January. And here in a couple weeks, man, we're going to ramp up promotion for it and a pre-sale, and we're going to reveal the art, the album title, and we'll have a new song for people to listen to and a video as well. So yeah, we can't wait to get that started, and we're really happy that we're with Black Doomba Records and that they're releasing it. We appreciate everybody's support, and I want to thank you, Nick, for having me on your podcast.
Now, what's the name of this album, by the way?
Well, I can't reveal that, so
okay.
but it will be revealed here in a couple weeks. But I've been sworn to secrecy, man. Sorry.
Okay, I appreciate it. Now,
no problem.
This has been an interview with Gravehuffer guitarist Ritchie Randall by Nick Purcell on Friday, July 31st, 2020.